Law firms have for 100 years made money basically selling intelligence by the hour, billing by the hour. That's all going to change now with intelligence being provided by the AI models.
So look, the hourly model has already broken down.
Basically, if AI can perform 70% of an associate's job, why do I have to pay for an army of hundreds of associates?
So firstly, I don't think it's correct to say that AI can perform at a level of a second year associate.
If young associates are using AI for most of the work, they don't get the depth of experience that
Absolutely.
we have.
Yeah.
So we are going to see an army of people who will be partners but won't have the depth that the current partners have. Think
You
about
have to
that.
safeguard against that.
Nishant, Parikh and Sridhar Gorthi helped build Trilegal from a challenger into one of India's largest law firms. In this episode of Corner Office Conversation, Vinod, Mahanta and Maulik Vyas ask how it broke into corporate law's closed club and whether AI, global competition and its own scale could now rewrite the model.
It's Thursday, the 27th of August. I am Anirban Chaudhary. This is Corner Office Conversation.
Welcome to the podcast. 25 years back, when you started Trilegal, there was a firmly entrenched establishment in place. From then on, Trilegal has gone on to become one of India's top law firms. What did you see which establishment couldn't?
I think to start with, we have to remember that back in 2000, very different atmosphere, very different environment. We were into our first decade of liberalization. What we felt is that when we came into the market and we were looking for meaningful roles in other law firms, traditional law firms, we felt a little discouraged by the structure of the law firms, which were back then very closely held and very, very much owned by the families and the promoters. Some of us had come from experiencing international firms and organizations, and we felt that this would be stifling for us just in terms of our future growth. So the idea was to set up an organization where we would have liked to work. A meritocratic organization, a flat organization, transparent, where anybody could aspire to a leadership position and ownership role. And our model allowed us to make the most of those opportunities, because our model allowed us to become full service. Our model allowed us to expand into new practice areas, as in when there was there's some brand new practice areas that came up in our lifetime, like competition, like bankruptcy. Our model allowed us to be agile, get the right person for the right role. And so therefore, we capitalized on those opportunities better than some of our competitors, given our model. So both had a role in that sense.
See, in every firm's journey, there come a few inflection points, as Prashant said. At what point did clients start seeing Trilegal less as a challenger and more as a first choice?
I'll take this one. I would say about 7 years ago, right? Just pre-COVID is when we really started to get recognized by clients, by publications, by media, by the various international rankings, and that was when we started to really become full service, and we started to grow into the practice areas where traditionally we probably did not have market leading practices, and this was all very deliberate.
I'd say that the fact that so many good lateral partners joined us in recent years really created not just I'd say not just news, but at the end of the day, when a good quality partner joins you, it sends a lot of signals, right? It's sending a signal to clients. It's sending a signal to the other firm. It's sending a signal to your own lawyers within the firm that there is someone who has a very good, stable, strong practice, who's actually trusting his or her career with our firm. And in many ways, that has, I think, it really sets some of the good, positive energy going in the firm.
I just want to add, we always felt we were number one. We always thought of ourselves as tier one firm.
So Trilegal, if you see, it was built to challenge the old establishment. You were the insurgents. Now, if you look at the numbers and the positioning, you have become the part of the establishment, right? How do you not become what you wanted to disrupt?
No, absolutely. I think that's
Because more and more insurgents, when they become establishment, they start behaving exactly like what they didn't want to.
no, you're
start.
absolutely right. And I think that was always the challenge, right? When you are the underdog and you're fighting for your place, there is a certain momentum and hunger and passion. And once you've achieved that, how do you maintain that momentum? How do you not become complacent? I think the answer is actually in our model, because this is not something we choose to do. We put into place so many safeguards to ensure that we can never become, either too closely held or too dominated by one or two partners. So that it's the culture of the firm, but also the fundamental constitution of the firm that prevents us from sliding into or into those types of models or pitfalls.
You just talk about culture. Trilegal had 50 partners in 2020
Yes.
when pandemic hit. In 6 years, you have 161 partners. How do you make sure that culture remains intact that you are talking about?
That's a great point. So,
And especially given the number of laterals you are hiring.
Yeah.
these days.
yes.
Yeah.
So, out of the 110 partners, roughly 60 to 65 are lateral partners. And I feel it's a very valid, legitimate question to ask, right? But for the one partner who has joined us laterally, we would have had at least 5 to 6 options, right? And I think it always starts with asking the question on fitment, whether the person you're talking to fits in well culturally. That's one. The second thing I'd say is that culture is not static. Honestly, we had a great culture. We still have a great culture, but we learn all the good aspects and perspectives and behaviors that others bring into the firm. And so there's, I'd say that as long as the culture is evolving in the right direction, it's great.
There is also, we see in the legal industry, there is a huge gap between top tier firm or so-called full service firms and the larger middle firms like mid-sized firms. So why have so few mid-sized firms managed to make that leap? And is Indian corporate law facing a kind of missing middle phenomena?
There is midlife crisis of a lot of mid-sized firms, which we can see in the
That's
market.
true. That's true. There's perhaps a whole variety of reasons behind this, but some of it really probably boils down to what I call the founder-rainmaker trap. There is that stage in a firm's evolution where the founder rainmaker, who's grown the firm to that stage till that point of time, starts to think of whether to grow and how to grow from there. Some of them take a call not to grow from there, and that's perfectly fine. Some take a call to grow, but still are not able to attract the talent in order to grow. And that really goes down to the foundational model that you have. do you have a model that attracts the best talent? And if you don't, then even though you might have the intention to grow, you're not going to be able to attract the talent and grow. So I really feel that really boils down to what that founder rainmaker wants to do at that stage.
I think a couple of good decisions taken very early in our evolution, right? And this is in retrospect. It's not that we knew that we are taking such profound decisions back at the time. One was that we put into place this egalitarian, equitable model before we become big. Because, to kind of implement that once you're already 100 lawyers is very, very difficult because it involves the founder pool giving up a lot of what they had kept to themselves. Whereas we started off with that model.
But one of the things is, as firms grow, there is a core of people who lead everything. So in a way, it also leads to a certain kind of oligarchy, right? There will always be senior partners. The rainmakers have big say in the firm. There will be powerful practice heads. How did you make sure that that didn't become a factor to which would hinder growth?
And the first thing is that we have to stand for election every 4 years. So that, and we have also a board, right? So we have, even in our decision making, take lateral partners, for example. The partnership has to vote to invite a partner, and it's one partner, one vote. So that itself has an effect of, I would say, distributing the power into a wider range of. And the second aspect is, as Nishant mentioned earlier, there is no partner reporting to partners. We are a flat structure. There's no hierarchies. So power does not concentrate because our system does not allow it to.
So basically, from the beginning, private equity and FIIs were your primarily a big client back in the days. Now, of course, it's a full service law firm. But we see this tendency where increasingly, whether it's fund, whether it's conglomerates, they are ramping up their in-house legal talent.
Yeah.
They are also the people with lots of deep pocket to invest in AI and other technology.
Yes.
So do you think that is also becoming a challenge for you to keep on increasing your pie at that side? And how do you look at that competition?
100%. You have to really be focused on how to not just stay relevant, but how to convince the client or demonstrate to the client that you can add value as an external law firm, right? And I think there are a few ways in which we are able to do this, just given our size and scale and breadth. We're able to bring a lot of great expertise to the table. So for instance, if a client had to do an M&A in a regulated sector, today it's not just about having great M&A lawyers. It's also about bringing the right tax lawyers. It's about bringing the right sector expert who understands the issues that the sector faces.
Value is migrating, actually.
Value is
Absolutely.
definitely migrating.
And so it's at the intersection of many practices that we find that we can add value to clients.
You also have to pivot. There are certain practices which will over time get commoditized. You have to be a little ahead of in the thinking, right? As you rightly said, value is migrating. Now, just drafting a good document is not your moat, right? You have to have the depth of technical expertise and the judgment, and on the go no go decisions, where you really demonstrate your value to the client.
Lawyers will have to be very good businessmen going forward, because looking at the changes and the disruptions that are coming in.
100% agree. And I think, it's time to also think very deeply about functional capabilities and the technical backbone of a law firm, right? The technology backbone of a law firm, right? We have invested a large amount of time and effort and money on, of course, every client is adopting AI, but how do we adopt it in a manner that is intentional, that is value accretive, that is safe from a confidentiality and privilege standpoint? All of these things, our job is to stay ahead of the client's thinking on how to use AI for legal outcomes.
Foreign law firms have spent decades waiting at India's gates. What are India firms actually afraid of? Competition for clients, competition for talent, or possibility that global firm will just expose how much money Indian law firms are making, the top Indian law firms are making.
I feel that the Indian market is a hyper competitive market and extremely competitive on pricing. And so when I look at the possibility of foreign law firms coming in, I feel that there's a lot of advantage in being full service, in being large, and having that breadth and depth, right? Which perhaps in the initial years, foreign law firms will not bring to the table for clients. If you look at how they have grown in other markets where they opened a few decades ago, you'll find that they have focused on their areas of strength, which are typically corporate capital markets and financing. But when you have to practice in India and give holistic advice to clients in any mandate, whether it's M&A, disputes, or an advisory mandate, you need that local knowledge, you need that cross-functional expertise to bring to the table. I feel, honestly, we have a great advantage. We feel that advantage. We're completely fine with foreign law firms coming in, and so we don't see that as a danger. Yes, it may have some, temporary, it may cause some temporary disturbance. It may lead to talent loss in some firms. But I feel that those are competitive forces, and you can't stop competitive market forces beyond a point. Let them play out. Perhaps it just brings out even better lawyers in all of us.
And as far as the economic element is concerned, if you see any jurisdiction that's opened up to foreign law firms, average rates have gone up. So the entry of foreign law firms has a positive impact on rates and fees. So as as we've been saying for many years, we would actually welcome the entry of foreign law firms into the country. But what we've also been saying is that equal amount of effort needs to be put on regulatory reform to allow Indian law firms to modernize, right? Whether it is LLP structures or websites or clarity on what we cannot do, hiring non-lawyers as professionals within law firms. We need our laws to also modernize to put us on an equal footing. And then, of course, it should be a free market.
So one of the things which is important in terms of this law firms coming in is it's been going on for about 5-6 years, and the debate has been going on for many years, but no firm has entered India.
Yeah.
What is the reason? Is there a Bombay Club kind of situation happening in legal also, or there are factors in Indian market which make it an unattractive market to come into?
I think it's the latter, but also the regulatory aspect. Foreign law firms did try at one point through the liaison office, etc., but there was an adverse ruling in the Indian courts that disallowed that, and they are finding that they are able to service their India work through fly in, fly out, and remote working. They don't have to have a physical presence here. So I think it's a combination of regulatory restrictions and the fact that India is a very challenging market in terms of rates and fees. And they are able to do a lot of India work, whether it is international arbitrations or capital markets transactions, without actually having a presence here. So it's a combination of all of this.
If we come to the existential question, which is basically staring at all the professional services firms, the question of AI. Law firms have for 100 years made money basically selling intelligence by the hour, billing by the hour. That's all going to change now with intelligence being provided by the AI models. Will the fundamental economics of the business change?
So, look, the hourly model has already broken down.
Yeah.
We see very few mandates that come with hourly fees. most clients prefer alternative fee structures, and they're customized as per the needs of the client. But when we look at alternative fees and the kinds of structures that clients prefer today, I feel that AI can unlock not just value, but can make it worth our while as lawyers. In many ways, I find it as a great opportunity for lawyers to elevate themselves as professionals and to spend that hour that they were billing out previously in doing extremely high intellect work.
And, I do believe that some of the hyperbole around what AI is capable of is maybe at least at this stage a little overstated. And until you have a AI judge and jury or an AI regulator, you're going to always need qualified, experienced lawyers in the loop because a lot of our profession is also predicting what will happen. Right? If you take a certain position which has a certain uh, um, ambiguity in legal interpretation, what is the likely outcome? This is where lawyers are bringing value, and I think AI has a long way to go before it is able to do that. But we are definitely looking at it as an opportunity to enhance our practice.
So, law firm for the longest period of time, they had this monopoly over legal advices, if we say this. Now, if we see consulting firms, even big fours, even other tech-led professional advisories, they are also now somewhere competing with the law firm, and also, say, getting into the practices that traditionally known as a law firm business.
Yes.
Do you see that as challenge?
I look at it in a slightly different way, right? It's really about how much we are serving our clients as law firms, and why are we not answering the questions that the consultancies and the non-law firms are providing to the clients. I think we have to ask ourselves that question first. And I really feel that there are lots of these spaces that law firms have just vacated over the years, right? And it really started happening because law firms at some point started focusing on the big events in a business, the big M&A event or that big dispute or that big controversy. And it was obviously worth the while to chase those events. I think law firms really need to start thinking about how relevant they can become to their own clients and start asking what else they can do for that client, right?
I think one other thing, traditionally, you're absolutely right. The minute Big Four entered a certain practice area, it was time for the smaller law firms to vacate that area because we couldn't compete with just the size of, manpower that they could bring, the scale at which they could do some of these, provide some of these services. Now, AI has an impact there as well. We have to relook at those assumptions, right? And law firms have some distinct advantages. We are much more agile in terms of what we are able to do compared to the Big Four consultancies, or because they have a lot of global restrictions. There is rotation. There is restrictions on what you can do for an audit client and not. We don't have those kinds of constraints.
Yes, and I feel that the new spaces, if I were to talk about new spaces that law firms could occupy, those should definitely be in the areas of compliance and in the areas of risks that arise out of laws and regulations, right? That is traditionally an area occupied by non-lawyers, but I feel lawyers can add a lot of value in those areas.
One of the questions which all the legal firms will keep on facing for quite some time is basically, if AI can perform 70% of an associate's job, why do I have to pay for an army of hundreds of associates?
We've obviously thought a lot about this question, right? So firstly, I don't think it's correct to say that AI can perform at a level of a second year associate, third. Those are maybe a little attracts attention and headlines, But the practical reality is that AI is good at identified tasks, not a long process that a long litigation or a long transaction or a very large capital markets transaction requires. The entire process of 30 to 40 tasks that have to be completed in order for the successful outcome in a long-term transaction is not something that AI is doing. AI is performing specific tasks, and it is doing them with increasing efficiency. Every model becomes more efficient at those tasks. So you still require lawyers to very much be part of that process and to analyze and critically evaluate those outputs. So we don't think that this is changing at the pace that perhaps some of the tech companies seem to be suggesting. To answer your question, well-trained, critically thinking lawyers are very much still an integral need of the profession, and we are continuing to hire and continuing to train them. But as I said earlier, the training is different.
So that's the next question. After well-trained, critically thinking lawyers come through a process which like Trilegal has. Okay, for 3 years for certain amount of time you'll do drafting, then A, B, C, D, E. If young associates are using AI for most of the work, they don't get the depth of experience that new people
Absolutely.
have.
Yeah.
So we are going to see an army of people who will be partners but won't have the depth that the current partners have.
You have to safeguard against that. No, it's absolutely, look, with every technology that has come in, right? Whether it is online searchable databases where you didn't have to go through the whole case law to arrive at, every technology brings with it the ability to maybe skip a few steps in the process. It is the rigor that you inculcate in your associates from day one, right? Now, you have an AI summary. You had case law summaries before also.
Yes.
But a well-trained associate read the full case law and is able to speak beyond what the summary provided. So that rigor and that training and those ethics need to be reinforced ever so often, right? As part of your training, as part of your evaluation, as part of your reward programs and all the rest of it. So I don't think the technology in itself has this outcome. It has this potential to create this outcome, but we have to safeguard against it through our own systems and practices.
Has this corporate law in India, it has replaced old aristocracy with the new credential aristocracy. What I mean is like hiring only from NLUs or Oxbridge or Ivy Leagues or elite clubs. It has that become now a like credential aristocracy in a market?
Look, yes and no. I think many organizations went through this phase where they said that they were only going to hire from the top 5 law schools or the top 10 law schools. But I think much of that thinking has changed. Many of our partners realize that you can find good talent anywhere. I find that in our organization, we have a more holistic and perhaps a more mature, well-rounded view of talent that helps us actually acquire talent from many, many sources. We've also focused a lot more on internships and hiring through internships. In fact, most of our fresher intake last year would have come from interns who were hired into the firm. And I feel that it's in many ways our responsibility. If we are the market leaders of today, ultimately it becomes our responsibility to ensure that opportunities are widespread.
I do concede, though, that legal education in India is the preserve of elite. There's a language barrier, there is an economic barrier. So as a firm, we are partnering with an organization, well, this is called the National Law Scholarship Program, which is identifying children from backward communities, from disadvantaged communities, from aspirational districts, the bright students, and bringing them into training from 11th standard itself. So you have English training, CLAT training, intensive training for 2 years. And we are already seeing some of those students getting their rightful place in the national law schools and the elite universities. We will support them through that journey as well, through this organization. And in fact, you know, you would have we were one of the earliest supporters of IDEA as well. So we know that we also have to do our bit to democratize access to legal education in this country. I think that's a very important question which you asked.
So, last question. Trilegal was built as an institution, not around individuals. But the ultimate test of institution is whether its founders can let go. How do you think about giving up power?
Oh, it's again very much part of our constitution. As I said, we have elections, and you know, over time, there's a very clear mandate for intergenerational shift in leadership. If you see, we have 5 non-founder members on our board. We have all our practice groups are led by non-founders, and we have them in all positions of responsibility, all in preparation for a management transition. I agree with you. The real test will be a complete transition of power and management. But one of the things written into our constitution is also a retirement age of 65. And so there's no continued ownership, and all founders will be out in a matter of 5-7 years, not just from management, but from the firm itself. So again, I think we will be proved right on that front as well.
Yeah, I'd like to add that, you know, we should also ask ourselves why founders don't let go, right? And it's got a lot to do with the economics of it. It's got a lot to do with perpetuating ownership, control, relationships,
Family.
all of that, right? And if you don't have any of these elements, where you don't have concentrated ownership, you don't have control over client relationships, then you're looking at a far more professional setup where, you know, the job of people who manage the firm ultimately is seen as just that job and that responsibility. And I always look at, you know, the behavioral aspects of things more. In this firm, it's that much easier to let go.
Thank you so much for sparing time out of your busy schedules and joining us here.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate
It's a
it.
pleasure.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us here.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
That's it for today. You were listening to our latest Corner Office conversation. It was produced by me, sound designed by Amrit Reggie. Keep following our podcasts on your favorite platforms. Stay tuned.